This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast brought to you by the Genesis Company, coming at you Monday evening. It's January 1st. Happy New Year. Today's show will be the usual Monday morning pod with Chris Hine from the Star Tribune. Of course, with the difference being that the Wolves already played today. It was a matinee game at Madison Square Garden against the Knicks. Classic too little, too late loss. Knicks 112, Wolves 106, which we'll, of course, get into. I thought there's actually plenty of interesting positive and negative trends to come out of that game. Chris, you were there. You are still there, or you're back at your hotel now?
Correct. They were kicking me out of the press room. I was going to record from the press area in MSG, and security guard comes in and is like, is like 8:15 is the time, and he's like, let me go check on that. And he comes back in and he says, yeah, that's a hard 8:15.
That's a hard...
So I had to exit. So here we are. Monday morning podcast, evening edition.
Yes.
After dark.
After dark. Dane and Chris after dark. I was, I wasn't in the locker room. I was at home and watching the game again, put together some of those topics. But, you know, my experience whenever I am in the locker room or whatever after a game, I always feel like kind of a trend, or the trend of the game sort of crystallizes, because it's the trend that, you know, the players and the coach have. So I guess just start there. Like what was the mood in the locker room afterwards? What was kind of said? What was the gist of it?
It wasn't, and you've seen a lot of, we've all seen a lot of Timberwolves losses over the years. Their losses are not created equal. The teams feel certain losses more than they feel others. This was a loss that I think they'll have shaken off by the time they land back in Minnesota tonight. I don't think that they're beating themselves up too much about it. Yeah, they realized they didn't play well. That second quarter was a disaster. I think they felt okay with how they played in the fourth. Yeah. Jordan McLaughlin, obviously a huge bright spot. Cat gets on track offensively again tonight, despite the foul trouble. So I think all in all, not this one's not going to be a memorable loss or one that really stings with them. And this is kind of what they've done. They've been able to turn the page pretty quickly, which is why they haven't lost consecutive games all season. So I think they've really already done that. I think mentally that was the vibe I was getting, at least.
Yeah. Well, maybe let's start with the Knicks, right? And Julius Randle has 39 in this game, and I was just kind of thinking, you know, even before the game, I'm like, you know, they're going to start OG Anunoby. Like, who's going to guard him, right? Karl has typically done it, and he did again in this game. And I'm just kind of, I forgot that they're playing the Pelicans on Wednesday, but it's like Randle started the game really strong. I was like, you know, this is an interesting sort of type of matchup for the Wolves, where the primary scorer is like a four.
Yeah.
And so it's not somebody you are going to guard with Gobert. So it becomes like the question of, do you put McDaniels on him? Do you put Towns on him? Kyle Anderson off the bench, I thought he did a pretty good job on him. And I don't think it was like, I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't say Karl had a great game, but defensively on him. But Julius Randle's just good. And it's like that type of physical four is hard for them. And I think about Zion on Wednesday, and maybe that for a potential first-round playoff series, right?
Yeah.
And just this, the idea of how they can match up with that, because I think in the last game against Zion, that was a problem. Randle has kind of consistently been a problem for this team in this iteration of the Gobert Wolves. And I just did anybody say, did Finch or anybody mention like Randle after the game? What stood out to you about the Randle matchup?
I didn't really ask specifically about the Randle matchup. I was more focused on what the hell happened in the second quarter. Yeah. More than anything else. So I didn't really get to delve too much into that. Maybe we could ask Finch about it, you know, pregame on Wednesday. Yeah. But it's an interesting point, especially because of how both like Julius Randle and Zion Williamson are built,
right? Which
makes it a little tougher for Jaden to guard, you know, that big of a player. So yeah,
Jaden also did a good job on Brunson. Like
he did.
Brunson was 5 of 23 in the game, but it's, you know, you just kind of have to make that choice. And I don't think in the starting lineup there's the obvious defensive matchup for the Wolves. I kind of think like, sorry, I cut you off, but like I think you're gonna, again, let's just say they play the Pelicans in the first round, and what if Zion has like 37 in the first 2 games? Do you go like, okay, do we need to put Gobert on him? You know?
Yeah.
And so I just kind of think about in the idea of like trying different things. I would be interested to see that, you know, or like Giannis when they play them in, you know, whenever that is next month. I wonder if Gobert can be an answer, and maybe it's not. Maybe that's, I'm not even saying I think that's for sure what it is.
Yeah.
But to me, it's an interesting thought. And I thought obviously a theme of this game, in addition to the other things that you're mentioning.
Yeah. I think it's a good point because, you know, Cat can guard in that theoretical playoff series. Cat could guard Valanciunas, obviously. Yeah. Like that's not that big of a switch over, right? And I think if it were a playoff series, I'm sure they would at least experiment with it. We'll see what happens on Wednesday night. But it's interesting. I'm trying to think like who else in the West has that kind of thing. And
you would say Jokic, but we know kind of how they
how they would do that, and that's been proven to work. How would they match up against, like, say, I don't know, like the Clippers? Yeah, they don't have I don't know.
It's an interesting, and it's kind of a fun thing when you have a good team. I mean, you know, the Wolves are going to be in the playoffs, right? Like, which we haven't had that thought, you know, for many of the years. We've been covering the team. So it's where my mind goes in a lot of these games. And I think, like, to the Valanciunas point or Hartenstein tonight, like, if you do take Rudy off of the center, you're probably going to get hurt on the offensive glass even more, which was obviously a huge deal,
and
in this
which New Orleans can do as well.
Huge, totally.
Yeah, that would be a huge plus for them. The rebounding reared. I mean, we've talked about this before. They've done a decent job. They haven't done a great job this year rebounding, but they've done seemingly a good enough job rebounding, you know what, this season. So
during the game, we needed like a name for this 16-game stretch, you know, we talk about all the time. It's a really rough 16-game stretch. Road heavy, good teams. This was their 11th game in that stretch, and I looked it up. I was going to just look up the turnovers. Like, in this 10-game stretch, you know, where are the Wolves in turnovers? Dead last. Like, they have the highest turnover rate in the NBA since December 11th, when that was that first Pelicans game. Started the track, but the column next to it on cleaning the glass was rebounding, and the Wolves with defensive rebounding have been first in the NBA.
Really?
Yeah,
that surprises me.
Totally.
That really surprises me.
Yeah, and even with this, I mean, they got crushed on the glass by the Knicks, which is what the Knicks do. They're the best offensive rebounding team in the league, but the Wolves are still third, and now this since December 11th there. So I think it's fair for us to not freak out about the offensive rebounds given up tonight. Like, there's a bunch of different things to point to there. The Knicks are really good at it. It was a day game. Like, you're probably baking in some being a little lethargic with that there too. So I don't think we need to pile on a loss and be like, this is bad, this is terrible, this is. The turnovers thing is bad. Though. That has been, and that's obviously been a trend. It's been a trend, and even going back years prior with this group. So that's kind of the main concerning element of this team right now is, you know, how could they play without turning the ball over as much as they are, because it's nuts, man. I was looking, like, they're in that time, again, last 10 games before this, they're 23rd in offense, but 8th in effective field goal percentage. So it's kind of like, remember when Finch was giving us some of those stats pregame before the Lakers game, I think it was, he's like, we'd be a top 10 offense if we were turning it over at an average rate. And so, like, they're 8th in effective field goal percentage in the NBA, and those there should not be a 23rd in offensive rating and 8th in effective field goal percentage, and it is all the turnovers. And that is the one broader issue with this team right now, right? Is elite defensive team trying to convince us that they're something more than a mediocre offensive team. They can be. The thing that's holding them back is the turnovers. Wasn't as egregious this game, but I think Cat had 4 and Ant had 3, or one way or the other on that there too. It seems to be them, right? If they can find a way where Carl and Ant can lower their turnover rates, I think the team's turnover rate is going to come down a little bit. But you're running the offense through those two. You are playing in flow and freelance style as they like to do, and that's going to put you in jeopardy of turning the ball over a lot. And so I know Finch isn't going to change. Like everyone's like, oh, more play calls. I agree. I would like to see a little bit more of that, but there's these things that, how necessary are they for us to like hand wring when like Finch isn't. He's not going to be like, okay, scrap really the flow. Change. We're going to, yeah.
So I just think
the answers?
I think I'm reminded, my dad was a high school basketball coach, and one of his kind of biggest pet peeves was, obviously, like if you leave your feet on offense, you need to have a plan of what you're doing with the ball before you leave your feet. And I feel like not just if they leave their feet, but like when they drive into the lane, sometimes I feel like whether it's Ant or I don't know, Jaden or whoever, right? Yeah. Sometimes when they meet a crowd in the lane, it's like, oh, they don't know what they're doing next with the ball. That's the feeling I get just watching it sometimes. And then that leads to questionable passes. It leads to tough shots. And obviously the passings where the turnovers come into play. That's what it feels like when I watch that. Sometimes totally. Like they don't have a plan. And that's part of playing with flow and unpredictability. There's no, okay, once you hit the lane, you're looking for option A over here and option B over there. It's reading, reacting, and trying to process all that in the moment. And it's just not clicked in right now the way that we've seen it in the past. So I really feel that that's one of the things that I just, the vibe I get from just watching it is these guys get into the lane, they get around a crowd, and it's like, oh no, what do I do next? I don't know what I'm doing.
But part of the issue is the crowd itself. Yeah. It's like, it just like struck me when I was watching that Thunder game when I was like, oh my gosh, there is just so much space out here. Every time anybody drives the basket, it's like they kick it all the way out to the perimeter, and it feels so, the court just feels so expansive. Or if I watch the Celtics play, it's like that. And I think it's so jarring because I'm seeing this from the Wolves every night. And part of them is it's naturally going to be a little bit more packed in. It's part of their identity too. They want to be a good offensive rebounding team. They want to put pressure on the rim, but everything is just creeping into the middle there. So then and that's, if you don't make a good decision in a congested floor, it's more likely to then become, a turnover in those situations. And I think particularly on the Ant drives, those are the passing turnovers, right? Carl's have been a lot of charges. Those are both symptomatic of, driving into a crowd. And I don't know. I mean, there aren't really like a ton of options for Finch in terms of just like juicing the rotation with more shooting. Like you could play Troy Brown a little bit more, but I think you kind of know what you're going to get out of Troy Brown. It's not like, okay, here we go. We've got this huge 3-point shooting weapon on the floor. Like they need to have more space. And I'm not sure where that comes from exactly, other than, maybe playing Kyle Anderson less, but then he's about, it's just kind of one of those cycles where I don't have like the right answer of how to space out the floor for this Wolves team more.
I mean, and we'll see if they can get this corrected. You've made the point several times before, and we've talked about it a lot. It's like, this is usually about the time of year where a Finch offense clicks in. Where we've seen them kind of find their footing and take off. I don't know.
And it could, man. If you just drop the turnovers, it would. It just would.
That's right. It's just them just trying to figure things out. And like you said, the spacing has generally been pretty good. I mean, early in the year it wasn't great, but they figured it out, I think, a little bit. After a couple games,
Like those Rudy blocks tonight too. Like when Rudy was getting blocked to the rim, it's just like a swarm, you know.
Right.
Like
teams have adjusted to that. Like I haven't seen the Rudy lobs not work as much as they didn't tonight in any game this year. It seemed like every time they tried to get it to him, it was a turnover. Yeah. And then when he did catch it, he got blocked a couple times, and it just wasn't effective, or as effective as it normally is. And I feel like the Knicks, I mean, no Mitchell Robinson, obviously, but they still have Hartenstein, and it's like they have size, they have some size that super maybe super physical that maybe other teams aren't going to have in that way. So yeah, it's I don't know what the answer is other than be more careful with the ball.
Right. Yeah. It's probably just a mentality of that, of like just coming to grips with the fact that this is what it is going to look like. So maybe get more comfortable at times playing in a crowd, you know, if you're have a little more preparedness or a little more idea of what you're going to do, and don't try to force it. If it's not there, don't try to make the riskier pass. You know, we hear them say it all the time, make the simple play. Don't make the big play. They're not doing that. They're not taking that advice, as cliche and as simple as it is. It just feels like they aren't doing the easy things on offense. Let's got a break here quick. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. I know a lot of Wolves fans were at their New Year's Eve event last night, and we always, first of all, the owner texted me and he wanted me to wish everyone, all the Wolves fans listen to this, a happy new year. So a happy new year from Falling Knife Brewing Company, long-standing sponsor, obviously, with the show. And they're sending me pictures, videos from the games, in the bar room. The tap room there has been, full and fun for these Wolves games. They have 2 projector screens. They have the sound on. So as always, I'm always suggesting people to go check it out. But maybe as your schedule here and you move into winter gives you some more time for happy hours or to get out to Wolves games, it is really sinking in that is becoming the Wolves bar in Minneapolis. So always just keep that on your radar. Maybe this Wednesday, it's a home. If you're not going to the game, they play the Pelicans, and then I think Friday is a road game in Houston. So multiple times to go check it out this week, and obviously throughout the season. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company, Northeast Minneapolis. Chris, let's get a little bit more into that second quarter. I mean, I know what went wrong in the second quarter is what we were just talking about, is the turnovers and offensive rebounds and stuff like that. But what did you just get, that it was a sense that they just weren't really awake yet? Did they? Well,
I mean, I thought they played the first quarter well, so I don't know. I don't know that they weren't awake. They were up 9 after the first quarter, so I don't know that you can totally buy that. I don't know.
I'm just the cliche of the 2 p.m. game.
I know. Well, and it's also New Year's Day in New York City. The beat writers may have been affected by such a schedule. Such a schedule
loss
thing. So I don't know that I necessarily would buy that, as an excuse, especially because they did play so well the first quarter. It's just, I just feel like at times of late they've been prone to just a little loss of focus. I think we've seen that in some of these losses during this stretch. I think the big thing for me, the rebound was obviously a concern, but how many times in the second quarter were they getting beat on back cuts too? Like, it seemed like that was happening a lot more than it usually does. Reminded me a little bit of the OKC game in terms of some of the easy baskets that the Knicks were getting. So I think it kind of goes to something that I've often thought about with this team and how they play defense. I have a cough coming up here. Hang on.
You're good.
There we go. Tried to mute that for the people out there. Okay, great.
I sneezed right in everyone's ear last week. I was like trying to finish my point, and I'm like, okay, did I do it?
100%.
Yeah. So you're good. Continue.
But it just reminded me of something that I've just kind of been keeping an eye on, and I was asking about a little bit today after the game. Just how they play defense and the amount of attention to detail, the amount of focus, the amount of physicality, that is required for them to play at an elite level on a regular basis on that end of the floor. Like, I just feel like it's prone to moments of slippage. Sure. Like I just do with the way the schedule lines up, and whether that be they lose it for a whole game, they lose it within a game for stretches of time. Today was a game where they lost it for about half the game and then got it back in the fourth quarter. So I think you're just, with how they play defense, the numbers at the end of the year are going to bear out. I feel like, but it's within that, you're going to have to put up with these moments of just seemingly wear or tiredness or fatigue, or like, I just don't think you can be on as much as they were early in the season on defense for all 82 games. I think you're just going to be dealing with nights where they don't play excellent defense, they play pretty good defense, or they play really good defense for 2 quarters and not as great defense for the other 2, which is what kind of what tonight was. So I think that was a game where that showed itself tonight.
And back to the rebounding part of it, like, that is a way, even when the defense isn't super sharp, to be ending possessions. Like, that's why this defense has stayed good, like, in terms of its rating against these tougher opponents. We've definitely seen some of that slippage, but they've still been, in the month of December, one of the best defensive teams in the NBA. And I just think the rebounding, like, you fall back to that. You think about Gobert at the rim, you think about Jaden at the point of attack. It's like, really a huge part of this is ending the possessions. And I think that's one of the areas I think Karl's been really helpful the entire of the season. Like, even in some of his like worst games, like that Celtics game, I remember it was like, that was rough, but I probably to you too, when we were sitting on Media Row, I'm like, what? Karl's ending these possessions with defensive rebounds. He's not scoring. He doesn't have that. Yeah. And it was kind of like that against the Lakers a little bit too. Like,
it was,
the defensive rebounding is like your baseline. It kind of keeps you afloat. And I think that's important for this team. Where the game turned, right? Okay, second quarter was terrible. And you kind of, the beginning of the third quarter is a little bit of a hangover from that. Yeah. And then Jordan McLaughlin comes into the game. That's the real, I guess, positive takeaway. I think they were down by 21 at the time when Jordan checked in, about midway through the second quarter. By the time he checked out, at one point they cut it down to 4, from 21 down to 4. And those JMac stretch, I think when he checked out, they were down 8. Really did what he's been doing when he's been getting these opportunities of, not just putting, like, everyone's like, oh, he puts pace into it. It's like, yeah, he did that. He does that you can bank on that, but he's also been super active defensively. Yeah.
He came in right away, got 2 steals.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And he did that, whatever the last game when he checked it in the third quarter was too. Actually had a 3 in this game, which is, that's a big part of probably what's been holding him back there. So, I mean, I saw just some of your like tweets from after the game about, some of the players and Finch talking about it. Do you think we're getting to a point where maybe he does become an every night part of this rotation for the team?
I think so. Maybe. I hesitate to say yes. Yeah. Because we've watched Finch now for 3 seasons, and it's like, I feel like he talks about wanting to extend the bench a lot, right? Yeah. We kind of go through that cycle with him. It's like, oh, you want to play 9 guys? Oh yeah, I want to play 9 guys, and then it's 8.5, and it's always like that. If I feel like, and that's just what he's fallen back to. I mean, he did say after the game tonight, that JMac is, there might be a guy that just grabs that 9th spot, and JMac is on his way to doing that. Was basically what he said. So maybe it is, and especially as the offense is working through its issues, having him inject a little life on that end, a little ball movement, making the simple, easy plays. Maybe this is the time, just both from a micro sense of today's matchup and a macro sense of where this team is at in the course of the season. So I'd be stunned if he didn't play Wednesday night, But I'm not going to sit here and say that a week from now I'm expecting him to be playing 10 to 12 minutes a night, because I just don't know that that's going to be true.
I do think Finch is a rewarder, though.
He is.
You know, and that doesn't. I mean, it doesn't mean, oh, you have a good stint in garbage time and you're for sure in like the rotation the next game. But I do remember that with Jared Vanderbilt. I remember that's like where it all kind of started. And like Finch recognized that activity that Vando had. And then, you know, he kind of creeps in for the rest of the season, creeps into the rotation as like the 8th, 9th guy. And then the year after that, I think then he eventually starting for the team. And I just, maybe I remember that was a day game. That one time, I remember Finch with Vanderbilt.
Yeah,
like,
it was
referencing that.
Like a Bucks game or something.
Yeah. There was like multiple
in the COVID year, or the post-COVID year, or
we were like way up in those
the empty arena year. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah, and so I don't know. I just thought about that today, and I was like, there's clearly not a for sure option, and at that 9th man spot, there's certainly an argument to be made that we're sitting here like crying about turnovers. Like you can make a pretty strong argument that playing a point guard, a second point guard would help with that there. I think also tonight it kind of like broke up the Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert minutes together, which have been kind of the most egregious spacing issue minutes for this team. Not that, I mean, Jordan's not a knockdown 3-point shooter, but it'd probably be better than what it's been from Kyle thus far this season. Yeah. So I'm curious. I'm curious to see how it goes, because maybe that just flips a switch kind of for the second unit and stuff like that, where it gives you some more consistent life, consistent competence in the lineups that are majority bench players. That's what this team feels like it needs. It needs something to make the way up and down nature of these bench units be a little bit more stable. And when I think about back those couple years where it was like JMac and TP and Nas and Vando, you just kind of, the second unit grew in identity. I don't know if I was probably Torian Prince more than it was anybody in that group, but it was also kind of like JMac and Nas. And I wonder if they can't find something through JMac, maybe with that pace, maybe with a little bit more activity of making that second unit just have a little bit more juice to it, have a little bit more offense. I pulled, because, again, I was just sitting at home waiting for you. I looked up like,
spreadsheets, my favorite part.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, hold on. Let me get this all in here. I just looked up like the McLaughlin lineup combinations from last year. One, it's kind of, Jordan was hurt for much of the year. Right. And all of those are positive net ratings, but the guy he played with most was Prince, played Nas, Ant, Anderson, Noel, McDaniels, Towns, Gobert, all positive net ratings, but he was particularly effective when out there next to Ant and out there next to Cat. And I was just kind of like looking at this. I'm like, okay, we're thinking about, if you put Jordan McLaughlin out there, like, who would you want to play him with? And the first person I thought of was Nas, because we think of that from a couple years ago. And that was actually his worst pairing in terms of the team's effectiveness last year when they were on the floor together. And that kind of makes sense to me. When those two had a lot of success a couple years ago, it was a totally different roster. It was pre-Gobert. That team ran a lot more pick and roll, so JMac and Nas could run it. I say that to me, and I'm kind of, and maybe these numbers kind of back it up, that maybe it isn't that. Maybe JMac, if he's part of it, isn't just him and Nas rolling out there and doing it. Maybe it's, you sub in, Mike Conley plays like the first 6 minutes of the first quarter or third quarter, and then you put JMac in there to play the rest of the quarter with Carl and Ant, who normally play, almost the entirety of the first and third quarter. So, the numbers are going to be better because Ant and Carl are two of the best players on the team. But that really sticks out that, Ant and JMac plus 13.9 last year. JMac and Towns plus 18.1. Maybe that's an answer. I don't know. Maybe that's an answer of where you plug him in. Because if you're going to plug JMac in, it needs to be in a place where it works and gives that group some sort of identity.
It's like I said, it's the time. It feels like the time in the season to do that. Like, especially as you work through some of these issues offensively.
Right.
I'm not surprised because I feel like JMac just one of his abilities is just and Conley's kind of the same way, but JMac he'll get somebody the ball quickly, like he'll get Ant or he'll get Carl the ball quickly enough that if they're quick as well, have a little bit of an advantage on a defender. I feel like and that's one of his strengths as a distributor is he's very quick to make passes. And that goes kind of into what we've always said about him is that quick decisions, quick ball movement. The ball doesn't hang around when he's on the floor. I feel like that's one of his gifts. And if you are able to do that with Ant and Cat, give them that little extra edge, I feel like it benefits them overall. And by the way, we saw some Conley and JMac minutes tonight as well. So
I was thinking about that too. Like Conley plays off ball. Conley plays off ball a lot of the time with Ant. I don't think it's not necessarily awkward for Conley offensively to do that in bits and pieces. Now you're playing two guys who are under 6 feet tall at the same time. That might present some defensive issues in those pairings. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what the right answer is to plug JMac in exactly or where, but it does feel like, and it sounds like from what you said about Finch, that it's an earnest consideration. And I'm optimistic about what that could look like, kind of when we talk about it's January, things change. Well, something often has instigated that in previous seasons where the Wolves all of a sudden became, a significantly better offensive team once the calendar flipped. I don't know if you're relying on that to be Jordan McLaughlin. That sounds kind of silly, but in some ways with the turnovers and everything, I think it makes
for
spurts.
Sense. For spurts it can be. And the question with JMac is we know, what kind of player he is and can be. It's just, was he going to get back to that point?
Sure.
After what happened last season. And even early this season when he has the knee injury that keeps him out of like 3-4 weeks of action. But if he's truly back to form, what we remember from 2 seasons ago, and in seasons before that, then I think you will see a lot more of him because right now he has a little something off the bench that nobody else can really bring. We obviously they had high hopes that Shake Milton was going to be this kind of guy, and still can be. You never know. Guys can play their way back into the rotation,
maybe into a new role, even
into a new role, right? And so you never write anybody off in the NBA if they're not playing. But if JMac is actually back to form, can knock down some shots, and make a couple plays on defense. Because that's always, a question as well with him. Then him playing 11-ish minutes a night, why not?
Right. Let's grab one more break, and then we'll close this one out with Chris. All right, Chris, this is kind of a bigger picture, I don't know, thought that I had during the game. And again, we're thinking a lot about the offense, and when we're doing that, we're thinking a lot about Cat and Ant. Is that where it starts? And I just like thinking about the idea of their offensive performances need to create an advantage for others around them. That's what's so critical, right? It's Ant when he's making that kick to Mike Conley in the corner in the Warriors game. It's Carl and the empowering Rudy Gobert element, the lobs, the stuff that he's, sacrificed and done. And I think we've just started to shift a little bit away from that these last 3 games. And it got me thinking about, back, 5-6 years ago or whatever, when the Wolves are bad, there started being that like empty stats Carl argument. And I don't agree with the concept of empty stats, right? Like, if you score 30, like you scored 30, but there is a difference in like scoring 30 in a way that really creates advantages for those around you. And in a lot of those where there was a fair element to the quote unquote empty stats part of it is like, you think back about some of those teams that Carl played with, and maybe it was just all of his teammates were bad, but you were like, who is Carl elevating, of this group? Which teammate is really benefiting from playing alongside Carl? And I don't think that was happening earlier in his career. I don't think he was that. He has shown that he can do that, given the sacrifice he's made for Gobert, and given that, I mean, he's assisted to Gobert more than anyone else on the team has this season and last season too. So we know, Karl can do it. I thought the first half tonight felt a little bit like that before. It was like, man, he's like 4 for 4, but some stuff just felt a little problematic. And I was like, man, Karl, what can we do to create an advantage for those around him? And to Karl's credit, I thought in the second half, he did that. He was decisive, like you were talking about with JMac, firing, doing those sort of things, and you're having that advantage. But what I was really thinking about is Ant. I think these last 3 games, as he's said to us that he's going to be a lot more aggressive looking for his shot. And man, I mean, he's had some big games. He had the 44 against Dallas, 31 against the Lakers, 35 last night. I mean, those are 3 of his biggest games of his career in many ways, but I don't, in my head, log those 3 as 3 of his best games. And I think Ant has kind of had some of that where it's like, where is the advantage, the significant advantage? I mean, Ant, he's a threat in and of himself, and I know Karl is too, but that's what's kind of been missing to me about Ant recently, is in leaning more into his shot, there haven't been advantages, and guys like Nickeil Alexander-Walker or Kyle Anderson or whoever around them, they kind of need Ant to light the flame for them to even, be able to start moving at all. So I just think that's worth stating there, because if you just look at if you miss these last 3 Wolves games, you go, man, Ant's killing it, and he is. Yeah. But do you agree with that? To me, that it hasn't felt like as forceful as it looks on the stat sheet. Yeah, because if he's creating for others, the whole offense starts to hum, and you see some of these better performances that they have. It does feel like he is being very intentional about his shot. When he drives to the hoop anymore, I'm often feeling like, it's score first, pass later. That seems to be the mentality every time he drives anymore. And it's funny. I had a wedding last night for New Year's Eve, and I was talking with some people, and somebody said my buddy had Anthony Edwards on his fantasy basketball team, and I was like, I think fantasy basketball wise, Ant is like about to, like, I think he's going to start being like a 30 a night guy. I really do, and that's great, and there's huge value in that. But can you be the 30 a night while also doing more than that, if that makes sense? I think the stats are going to go up the rest of the year. And I think it's probably going to get him all NBA and all that stuff. But can he do the stuff that really on the margin? What are his assist numbers the last couple of games? It's like, I saw Jay's tweet about it, 4, 3, and 2. I mean, a lot of guys haven't been making shots when he has been passing to him. And maybe that's what it is. Well. Yeah. Maybe that's what it has been, where Ant is like, all right, like if you miss 1 or 2, it might not be coming back to you. It's not like he's not passing. Right. But there's a little bit more reliance, it feels to me, on himself than there is trust in his teammates to score. Not that it's 0 or anything, but it just feels like that's shifted. We've gone, there's been a little shift downward in that way. Yeah, well, he said when he made the comment, it was about the OKC game. Yeah. And he said that he felt like he left some scoring out there for himself. I'm looking at the line from that one. He had 25, 7 of 16. Yeah. 16 is like the least amount of shots he's taken in a game. Yeah, pretty much all year. Other than like, there was one Memphis game he took 14, another 15. So 16 shots is a low number for him. And he had 6 assists in that game. The offense as a whole didn't play great that night. So maybe he was trying to get, that could have been maybe a 10. I think that was one of the hip games, like right after the hip. I think that was OKC. No. Okay. No, I'm talking about, I don't know, Memphis. I don't know. But yeah, it was low. And the OKC game was low. And this came after one of his, I think, maybe his best performance of the season against Sacramento. Sure. Where 34 points, 10 assists, great mix of everything. And then that OKC game seems to have had a
an imprint on
well,
him.
And we're just saying it seems to have had an imprint because he said so. You know, he said after that game.
But he's stuck true to that word, though.
And you guys were doing the Finch presser after the Lakers game, and John and I went into the locker room because they were going at the same time, whatever. And Ant did say again, like John asked him, was that the same mentality in this game against the Lakers? He was like, hell yeah, like we're staying with this, staying with it, aggressive. I'm looking for my shot, and so I think it's fair to say there's been some sort of mentality shift in Ant, but it's also wise of you to point out, or 4 games ago, Dane, that he was just playing a great all-around game where he was doing exactly what you're asking for, creating an advantage and doing that. And that's my point, is not at all that Ant can't create an advantage or Carl can't create an advantage. He does. They both do. But they got to get back to that a little bit more. And when we're looking for these things to get a little bit better and a little bit better offensively, which is the main focus of this team, I think it starts with them creating advantages for their teammates, because they're going to be able to get their 25, 30, whatever. Like they can kind of do that. Can they do that while you're setting up Nickeil Alexander-Walker for 3-4 wide open threes in the game, Rudy for a couple of lobs like that? That's the biggest thing I think this team needs right now.
We've talked about their need for maybe a little more shooting in the past. You think, if they find that somewhere, whether it be, in the trade market or whatever, maybe that opens it up a bit. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here.
No, I mean, I think, well, it's what we were talking about at the beginning. It's right now that it's so condensed is making it harder for them to do what I'm asking. Because
if he, let's give a theoretical here, right? Let's say Ant's on the floor at a time when Rudy and Kyle are on the floor. It's like, Ant sees Kyle in the corner, and I'm not saying Ant's going to think this, but it's like, oh, well, if I pass it out to Kyle, he's not going to shoot it, or like, you know what I'm saying? Like, does this enter into his head?
No, it has to. I mean, or even just subconsciously making these quick decisions. It definitely. I mean, we could go through and find a clip, and we would be like, he didn't pass it here because it was Kyle. Like that definitely has happened, and so now you take one of the options away of what you could do, and it's it's pushing him further into a crowd, and he's just like, all right, well, I'm gonna go get a bucket then, or try to. And again, he's been getting buckets. Like he's had 30 plus in these last 3 games, but I don't know, maybe it's just me overacting, or maybe it's like, you're doing this after a loss, whatever, but it doesn't, the impact of the game when I watched them did not mirror the box score. And earlier in Ant's career, if Ant had like 38, or when he had like 42 that first time against Phoenix or whatever, you were like, when he had a big scoring output, you were like, okay,
you felt it.
You felt it. And that's just a little shift I felt these last 3 games. And I'm sure with practice and talking, whatever, like you can get there. I'm just saying, I think to get back winning, it's a must.
I'm with you. And that's what they've always preached with him, is you have the ability to, because of all the attention defenses have to pay to you, you have the ability to open this offense up for everybody else. And they often say, when he gets doubled, one of the things that they've had to kind of stamp out of him is, don't try to fight the double team. Just get rid of it and trust that the ball will work back to you at some point. When you drive, with
great power comes great responsibility.
Right, exactly.
As Chris Finch literally said.
When you drive and kick, you almost know that the ball's not going to come back to you. Yeah. So you're basically willingly punting on a shot attempt for yourself to create one for somebody else.
But what if he drives quicker earlier in the possession? You get off of it, and then you can get back,
and you relocate, and
that's where he's lethal, man. It's like once the defense is shifted and Ant gets it, and he can attack, and he has one guy to beat. Like it's like Giannis, It's like, let's hope he biffs the layup here, Like he's just so speed and forceful that that he can kill anyone one-on-one, and that with a quick decision. It's tough when it's 2-3 bodies and they're all looking at you and you're coming down barreling at them. Like,
right,
they need to get him on the second side more often, and that requires him getting himself there, getting off it to get back to it.
Correct. And that requires deliberation and intention, which outside of driving with the intention of shooting doesn't feel like it's happening right now. I mean, look, he's some of these nights recently have been good, and they've won that Mavericks game, they won the Lakers game, but you're right, it's like a little more, maybe just a little more playmaking can really benefit this offense as a whole, and get some of these guys maybe back on track a little bit. Spread defenses out. They won't crowd you as much. The turnovers might start to come down a little bit for everybody. So I think all of this is maybe connected with each other.
Yeah. No, I agree. And this is just a point in time. They lost a game. It's okay.
Right. It's okay. It's okay.
A matinee game. You don't give up all those offensive.
But it's good. But it's good to delve into the weeds of some of this stuff. I'm
enjoying it. I'm enjoying it of like not being like, oh, this is hopeless, but like really, they've impressed me. So I've set this bar now in my head high.
And if you want to be the one seed, if you want a deep playoff run, you got to clean up the things that pop up from time to time. And this happened. And listen, it's an NBA season. This happens to every team. Every team has issues that they have to iron out at some point. Even the best ones. So, they might be going through it right now. Very interesting to see this next stretch of schedule here. One home game followed by 4 tough road games.
I think it is going to be the pivotal, that road trip. Houston, Dallas, Orlando, Boston is really going to be interesting. It gets really tough. They can really show me something that you win like 3. They go 3-1 in that. I'm like, okay, like let's go. This is a real. I mean, I as you and I talked about, I'm doing that road trip because I think it's gonna. I don't want to like if they go 1-3, that's totally understandable. I'm not gonna say it pushes them down the toilet or something like that, but they could really show me something in this stretch where those are 4 tough opponents all on the road. And if they're able to take care of some business there, like I'm gonna do the thing where I bump up that expectation a little bit higher and really start being like, I think this could be a conference finals or whatever sort of team. Which sounds funny after we were just talking about how this offense has struggled, but if they can get the offense back on track a little bit against hard teams, because the Pelicans before that at home, and iron out some of this stuff, flip that switch, that make whatever the January everything's good thing. Like if they could find that in a difficult stretch here, like let's go. This is gonna be could be a special team. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I appreciate you coming out of here.
No problem, sir.
In New York. I mean, there's nothing fun to do there at all.
No.
This is as good as it gets. Is doing a nighttime podcast.
So good.
You got anything you're cooking up? Obviously had the gamer from
nothing really in the future here. Just with the road trip coming up, I'll be at every game. That road trip, you'll be there. So again, I reiterate that that's made possible by subscriptions to the Star Tribune. And the coverage that you see, our ability to have locker room access on the road is really contingent on having a very good travel budget. So thanks for those of you that do support us, and if you're thinking about subscribing, hopefully that pushes you over into it. Like, I feel like especially with this season, hopefully you want to consume as much Wolves content as possible and make that us a part of that coverage.
Well, it's just I mean, particularly for a road game, it's where I go to get the information of what the players were thinking. You are the intermediary there, and I do a couple of these trips here and there. John does a couple of them, but you're the guy at almost every one of these road games. And it's an important thing, I think, to the fan base and to us, those of us who do want to be consuming stuff daily. So obviously StarTribune.com. all of Chris's work there. And yeah, what better year than this year to subscribe and just start reading more. And Chris is a great writer. So I really do recommend that. Again, Chris, appreciate you coming on late on a Monday night after New Year's Eve.
Yep.
But we did it. And I will see you back in Minnesota on Wednesday.
Sounds good. See you later.
You can follow Chris on Twitter at Christopher Hine. I'm Dane at DaneMooreNBA. Jason and I will talk on Wednesday morning. Until then, he's Chris. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hard so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.